my first store design project, I was hired as like the architectural designer, 3D modeler, etc. I actually didn't know how to use a 3D modeling program. Even though I didn't really know what I was doing, I didn't let that limit me.
You got to fake it till you make it sometimes, and that leads to real tangible results.
Welcome to the Phil with Forbes 30 podcast. This is Phil Michaels, Forbes 30 Under 30 entrepreneur and performance coach. Every year, Forbes names the top 30 entrepreneurs, leaders, and stars in the world. And each week, I bring you one of them to help you level up in your life and business. From celebrities like LeBron James to Kylie Jenner and Cardi B, to entrepreneurs with companies like DoorDash, Instagram, and YouTube, you're sure to learn from the list. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now it's time to level up. Level up.
Welcome to Phil with Forbes 30 podcast. Today we have a very special guest. She is the founder of Extra Terrestrial Studio in Brooklyn, New York, which creates spaces that enhance our sensory landscape. Instead of creating spaces for just one of our five senses, sense of sight, she designs and creates spaces catered to all five senses. She spent the last year designing almost a dozen retail and pop-up experiences for a range of small and large brands, and is currently a member of New Inc., the New Museum's Design, Art, and Technology Incubator. In 2016, she was selected to the Forbes 30 Under 30 for her role in developing emerging technology programs with the Obama administration. Previously, she served as a creative consultant on numerous large-scale real estate and hospitality ventures, and as an innovation consultant for Fortune 500 companies and nonprofits. She began her career as an investment banker at Goldman Sachs, holds a bachelor's in civil engineering from Princeton University, and an MBA from Said Business School at the University of Oxford. Please welcome our guest, Kate. Very excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Phil. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Excited to learn more about you and share your amazing work with the audience. Before we get started, where were you when you found out that you made the list?
Yeah, I guess I was still working on a lot of that emerging technology work with the government, and I was working at Luminary Labs, was the consultancy I was at, and so I was able to make the list through that work, and it was, I can't remember like the exact moment, but you're sort of aware of it before they actually tell you, and I thought there was like no chance in hell that I was, especially since everybody on it is like a founder of a company, and I was just like a consultant, so yeah, it was super cool.
And were you in DC at the time working with the government, or were you able to work out in New York?
So I was based in New York. Yeah, our main clients were mostly government. We also were working with some New York companies, Fortune 500 companies. Yeah, a lot of different things.
Very cool. And who was the first person you shared the news with? Because this is a very proud moment. I mean, an amazing achievement that you're getting recognized for, that probably led to a lot of notoriety. So who was the first person that you shared the news with?
I think it was, so my boss had like submitted me. So I think I had to tell her first, like job well done. But yeah, my parents definitely, of course, after that. I don't know. I think in the age of social media, it's kind of stressful when you find something out. You almost want to keep it to yourself for a few minutes and be like, this is cool. Because then afterwards you have to be like posting it here and there and this and that. And so it's nice to take a minute and
your parents must have been very proud. And yes, you want to enjoy that moment and savor it in solitude. I had a similar experience with regard to social media. I was at the Constitution Center in Philadelphia. And when I found out, and it was a professor that texted me and he said, "Hey, congratulations, well deserved." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Go look on Facebook."
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's how I found out it was already posted on Facebook.
Oh, wow.
Before I even heard myself.
Wow.
So
yeah,
social media.
Actually, I definitely, there was like somebody who was like, "I'm proud of my 5 friends who made it." And I didn't know that this person was like so connected on Facebook.
Yeah, wow. You had one friend that has 5 friends.
And I was like, I don't
list.
really know that person, but vaguely.
Sounds like a super connector.
Yeah, totally.
Well, as you know, things are crazy right now, especially being in New York. I can't imagine you are in the epicenter of all of it. How have you pivoted your work in response to COVID, and how do you think your work will change after this?
Yeah, I mean, it very much went from like a slow, like maybe this is going to happen, to like suddenly everything. And fortunately and unfortunately, that was like the precise moment I actually got COVID. So I had a little bit of like a break. Well, not really a break, but like, you know, all the anxiety of what should I do with this time was really put off. I like picked it up at a client site. We were working on a store, and obviously that store's we're not designing it anymore. And then I had some time to sort of like rest and reflect and obviously like recover, because that was the number one priority. And I think that's really framed my whole outlook on this time, has been like, number one, worry about your health, and then figure out what you can do with your business. But you know, since my work is, as you mentioned in the beginning, like sensory experiences and especially tactile experiences, that is just sort of off the table at the moment. So that's had me take a pause. I was lucky enough to have a friend in New Ink who was partnering with Mount Sinai to build these restoration and recharge rooms for doctors and nurses and frontline workers. So I've been helping with that. They're amazing. It's called Frontline Strong Relief, and it's now across like all 8 Mount Sinai hospitals. They've served over like 5,000 meals or something crazy to the frontline staff, and built these sort of immersive biophilic rooms where you can go and recharge, and they're showing like 60% stress reduction, which is really cool.
Can you elaborate on, first of all, I commend you on the laudable work you're doing. That's incredible. And kudos to you and the Mount Sinai team for making this possible. But can you walk us through, what does that actually mean in layman's terms of, you know, walk us through an experience of how it reduces the stress?
I mean, so I've been supporting, it's really the brainchild of Morel Phillips from Studio Elsewhere, who's a good friend of mine. And she's been working in hospitals for a long time, but this was like a chance to really do this dream project, which is like, you walk in and it's like Google Home voice activated, so you don't have to touch anything. And then it's like nature projected on the walls, like bird sounds, waterfalls. There's like 4 different settings you can pick. Do you want to be in a calm environment, or like, do you want to be in the mountains? Do you want to be near the ocean? And it's just, there's plants, there's like a scent diffuser, there's snacks.
Wow.
So
it makes you feel like you're in a completely different environment than just a regular old hospital.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for the doctors who are like constantly stressed out around the clock, working crazy hours, it's just this moment to like release and let it all go. It seems like it's been hugely effective, and I'm really proud of Morel and the rest of the team for getting it up so quickly. Because I was sick, I was here at home while they were doing all the hard work, but I've been really helping with the fundraising and branding and getting the word out. So
it seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah,
seems like a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't every hospital do this? So what's a reason that a hospital might not want to implement this? It seems much better than just a plain white wall.
Yeah, I mean, so one concern in the beginning was space, because they thought they were going to need beds in every room, basically, with everything that's going on. And so we found a couple rooms that were research rooms that just were too small for beds. So that was like one milestone to make through. And then, I mean, I think all the doctors have been asking for it to continue later. It's just something that it's like the last thing on your list until suddenly you're in this crisis. And, you know, we're talking a lot more about like PTSD and all those things that come with combat in military settings, also applying to medical situations. So those factors are really top of mind for the leadership right now.
That's incredible.
And that's helped.
It reminds me, Kate, of, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this was an IDEO project where children are typically afraid of getting an MRI or a CAT scan. Mm-hmm. And so they redesigned the rooms to be like an astronaut and you're going in the space shuttle. Nice. And another one, they had a aquarium-like room where you would go into a submarine and you're underwater and you have to look for the fish. And the whole room is colorful and design friendly, and the children love it, and they end up reducing their anxiety, their stress, and they're able to sit through the entire MRI, because sometimes they could be 30 minutes long.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely like the same concept, the inspiration, and yeah, definitely children too. Studio Elsewhere was working on another project that's on hold right now, but it's around children as well. And there's just so much more that could be done and so much imagination to bring into it. So it's just about getting the money.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it first. If you are in healthcare, you know who to reach out to if you want a design experience like this for your hospital. Where do they go for that specifically? Yeah,
I mean, so for that, Studio Elsewhere is the studio that I'm working with, and Morel there is the leader of that team. There's also a GoFundMe right now for the Frontline Strong Relief effort. So we're just trying to cover our costs and make sure we can continue to scale it. So if you go to Frontline Strong Relief, you can donate there too.
Frontline Strong Relief, perfect. We'll put it in the show notes as well, so you in the audience can check it out and support the cause. Kate, take us back to the very beginning, where you're from, where you grew up, and the path that led you to where you are now, making it ultimately to the Forbes list.
Yeah. So I was born in New York City. That was definitely very formative for me, like being like 3 or 4 years old. Like the playground was like going to Guggenheim in the Met. And like the spaces, just like the architecture, I think had a huge impact. So that definitely influenced my career direction. Although at the time, obviously, I had no idea. But then we moved to the suburbs, which I was desperate to get out of. And then I went to Princeton, as you mentioned. I did an architecture and engineering program. You know, I wanted to be an architect, but I thought it would be important to like understand how buildings stand up. Like I thought that might be useful to know. Yeah. And funny enough, it's like not really part of most architecture programs, but Princeton had like an engineering side of it where you got to study all of that. So I did that, and that was great. I got like a little disillusioned, I think, though, with architecture. It was super theoretical the way we were learning, and we were like knitting like Mobius strips with like dental floss. It was like these crazy weird projects. And I don't know, I maybe watched American Psycho too many times and decided, well, why not try Wall Street? Like that seems cool and a useful way to, you know, apply my math skills, and I don't know, just a lot more like opportunity as like a 23-year-old, 21-year-old, whatever it is, coming out of college to like be in the boardroom with CEOs and be out there. So
you wanted more hands-on, tangible.
Yeah, I mean,
action.
with architecture, it's like 8 years before you're like actually building anything, right? Because you go to school, you go to master's, then training and licensing, and then you start at the bottom. Wall Street was like, here you go. You can be like right with these real estate leaders, hospitality leaders, day one. Crazy hours, but probably the same actually as architecture. So
how did you know this is what you wanted to focus on? Like,
I mean, I knew
what drew you to the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, so to now was like a very meandering, like long path. I knew banking was not going to be my life path. I knew that pretty early on, but it took a lot of trial and error to come back to this sort of spatial design, interiors, architecture stuff. I think, you know, it took me a long time to build my confidence up as a designer again, to like convince myself and also convince other people that I was a designer. Because it's interesting when you come out of school, whatever you do first sort of gets pegged as like your label. It's very hard to convince people you can do other things, even though you really choose that first thing, you know, at the age of 19, not really knowing anything about it.
You're still so young. You're like a stem cell. You haven't really assigned yourself a role yet. And you're exploring You're exploring all these experiences, and then you get, like you said, you get labeled, and then it's so hard, that friction to kind of lose that previous identity of yourself and form a new identity, because your social peer pressure, your friends might be like, well, what happened to the banking, you know, gig? And then you have to explain yourself. And
yeah, totally. And yeah, I mean, I think I chose the worst approach, which is changing industries like 5 times to get to where I am. No, I mean, in a lot of ways it was good. Going back to, you know, your question about making the list, it was sort of that intermediate step that helped me get there, and working in consulting and sort of the bridge between like the finance sort of traditional post MBA world and this sort of creative design world. And that was really a great experience. And I was at that company, Luminary Labs, for 4 years and learned a lot. It was a female-led company. And yeah, I mean, I think without that experience, I wouldn't have been able to transition like I have.
That seems like a big, the dichotomy between like a male dominated society of Wall Street banking to a woman-led company. And how did you, at that pivotal moment, like how did you go from Wall Street banking to design and to this firm?
I mean, I definitely took my time in business school, like exploring what was out there. I mean, business school for me was really like a chance to reevaluate. And Luminary Labs was like sort of that hybrid between strategy and it had some design pieces to it, but it was a more formal version of consulting, sort of more like management consulting. So that was a place where I was able to, and also being a small team, I was able to like come in and do the traditional post MBA stuff. But then they gave me the leeway to do design and start a design team there, and hire someone and really imbue that into our work. So that was really cool. I mean, I think it was also a different situation because the scale. I mean, Goldman was huge. You can't just like say, I'm a designer today and, you know, they're going to give you a new job in a new office. But in a small company, you can do that.
I can imagine. So what advice would you give to someone maybe looking to pivot into a new industry? Because you went to a completely different industry, and there's probably a lot of individuals out there that are fearful about making that big jump. So what advice would you give them? Yeah,
I mean, I think first figure out like whether you really want to do this thing or if it just sounds good because you hate where you are. And before you leave, like I did a lot of night classes at Parsons and SVA on design. One was furniture design, but it still helped me figure out, okay, is this what I would rather be doing in my day to day? And then like online classes, Linda, etc. And then, you know, you just have to start making stuff because nobody's going to believe you that you can do this thing if you just tell them. You have to show them. And it's really not fun to like force yourself on the weekends to like do these projects. But in theory, if this is what you want to do with your life, hopefully you'll enjoy parts of it. And then you can walk in and say, I've actually already done these things. Like they can be really scrappy. And I made like dioramas out of like LaCroix, like LaCroix boxes, and like put little characters in them. And I was like, look, I can design space. And like, of course it wasn't perfect, but it was something to start talking about.
I love that. That is so cool. And I think that's general advice for everyone and anyone, that you don't have to commit to just one field or one label the rest of your life. Just run small micro experiments where you were learning, for example, on the side with online courses. You were running these little micro projects on your own on the weekends. You could test your abilities out. You can test your interests out before you decide to commit to something for the next 10, 20, 30 years of your life. I think that's kind of an antiquated philosophy that we've been taught growing up. It's like, you got to go to school, work hard, get good grades, get a good job, and then, you know, get a house, get a car, have kids. And it's like, whoa, hold on a second. Let's grow up first. Let's experiment. Let's learn about ourselves first before we decide to commit or label ourselves with anything.
Definitely. And I think we will have like 10 different careers in our lifetimes as millennials. I mean, recessions aside, which also affects it, like just everybody's working until they're like 80 at this point. And we're so digital. We can be like doing some kind of job from our house when we're older. And I don't know. I think you got to get ready to do a lot of different things.
100% agree. It seems like, Kate, now is the perfect time. It seems like a lot of people are reflecting on where they're at in life. Do they want to make a change now? And they have extra time to work on that unfinished project they've been putting off for a while, or take that online course that they've been putting off for a while, and maybe say, hey, is this really what I want to do the rest of my life? And maybe a lot of companies are realizing, hey, we don't need to be having an office, for example, a physical office where people can work remotely, and actually they might even perform better and be more productive.
Yeah. Oh, I'm super psyched about that. I've always loved working from home. I would do my best work when I'm when I'm working remote. So I'm like, and I know it's not for everybody, but I think if you have the choice, it's just going to increase productivity for the people who choose it, who want it.
Yes, people don't want to be told what to do. They want to have freedom to have autonomy and be their authentic selves. They know you know yourself better than anybody. So why not get to choose when and where you work?
It's a little crazy. Like, you get out of school and you're an adult, but then there's all this like, well, we don't trust you to do your work if you're not in the office. Like, I think trust goes a long way. I mean, I think that's the most important part of being a leader, is being able to like trust your people. And if there's a lack of trust because people are misbehaving, there's deeper issues. It's not just remote work.
That's a great point. And, you know, even my girlfriend's boss, he was like, man, I didn't realize how many subscriptions and softwares we were paying for that we weren't even using. And realize that we don't need a physical office. So have you noticed that because more and more people are working remotely, that companies are seeking your advice or consultancy or maybe design projects for how they can help their employees create a nice home office, something that's aesthetically pleasing, but also helps them be productive? So that way, because what I've noticed from a lot of my peers and even my clients, it said, like my client at Harvard, he was like, you know, this is my first time working at home. It feels like I just work 24/7. Where I eat, where I sleep, everything is all in one. And so we worked on delineating his workspace so that he has one table for personal projects, one table for his projects at work, etc. So how have more people been inquiring about your services there?
Yeah, no, it's definitely something I'm talking about a lot, especially with also the frontline strong relief stuff. It's like nature, like how do we get that in our spaces too? When you're stuck in like one room, you know, how do you make it feel bigger? It's something I've been doing just on my own. Definitely, because I work from home a lot, is having separate spaces for different things. I think you really have to learn what works for you. I think it is hard to advise people because every space is so different and there's no like one layout that works, but I have like a projector to save space. There are a lot of things you can do to maximize your space. Oh,
that's a good tip.
Really change the environment.
Is there any other quick tips, like 1, 2, or 3 tips that I like? I have the plants, so I got check that one off.
The plants are good. The plants have like a lot of benefits besides the air purification. They're also like, they just help your brain relax. There's this whole soft focus thing that when you're in nature, like you sort of turn off a little bit and go back to your primal state. So that's always good. I have some like theater, they're not like theater lights, but I got them on the Amazon, but they're basically different colored lights. I mean, I know all the teenagers are doing this on TikTok, like putting colored lights all over their bedrooms, but being able to like change the color of the lighting can also help me switch from night to day. You know, like daylight, it's bright, but then like at night I have like some pink lights and blues and softer stuff. I mean, you can even buy those color changing light bulbs.
The Philips Hue,
the Hue
light bulbs.
Yeah, we use those in the studio elsewhere projects as well. And I mean, I think lighting is huge. Oh, so plants, one big thing,
lighting,
plants,
projector
lighting,
to save space.
That definitely helps. Music helps. And then another thing that I learned from, we visited this house in Hawaii. It was like a modernist architect. There was storage everywhere. Basically every wall, every place in the house, you could store everything. So the house looked totally clean all the time. And that really blew my mind. I was like, oh, maybe I just need to cover all my walls with storage. And then it'll magically clean my apartment, which didn't fully work. But I've been doing my best to like add those elements too.
I'm such a stickler when it comes to the organization stuff. And I learned is if you just have a place for where everything goes and you put it in that same place every time. Like my girlfriend, she has those like bobby pins or like hair clips, but she didn't have a space for them. So they ended up all over the house all the time. And I'm like, we need to create a centralized location. So we got like a little jar and that's where they go now. And it works.
Yeah. And then you remember where it is when you need it.
You never lose them.
I'm the same way. And I'm also trying to get my boyfriend on that plan too. So
we're on the same page. Well, that's awesome. Do you have a plant that you recommend like a go-to plant?
I'm not the plant expert. I mean, I've tried, like I worked at a landscaping company in high school. Like the names like don't take for me for some reason. But there are a lot, you can Google it. There's like spider plants, I think.
Cool.
I don't know. Some of them are like, if you have pets, you have to look if they're allergenic or.
We have two that are called it's a snake plant.
Yeah,
and it's
that's one of the
also
ones.
called the mother-in-law's tongue. And those are apparently one of the top 3 or 5 for cleaning the air. So we have 2 of those. So those are.
So you're already the expert. You got it.
I'm practicing. So, one of the things that you mentioned was how you kind of had these different individuals in your life play pivotal parts. So who was someone that you looked up to, like a role model, maybe in the design world, or was it in the banking world? Who was someone that you kind of looked up to or admired and became someone maybe you wanted to model your life after? And because pivotal people are so important in your life to help you get to where you are now. Who were the pivotal people in your life? Who was your coach, your mentor, your role model?
Yeah. It's interesting. I never really had a formal role model until this New Ink program, which I was super lucky. I got paired up with somebody whose work I really respect and who's awesome. It's Alessandra De Benedetti. She's one of the founders of Wallplay, and they're doing really cool things with vacant space around New York and really built their model from the ground up. So that's been awesome to like have a formal mentor. I think before that, I was sort of figuring things out for myself. I mean, my parents were definitely a big influence. They both spent their whole careers in advertising, and they were both like, don't go into advertising, whatever you do. And funny enough, like I'm sort of around that space a lot more now. But yeah, I mean, I think they definitely like taught me a lot of things that are increasingly relevant. I think, even like personal branding was not a thing in the 90s, but it's something I knew about. And now with Instagram influencers, it's like everybody's talking about it. So, but I mean, most of my like heroes, I mean, I've had some fictional, some real. Willy Wonka, Gene Wilder.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
That chocolate factory, that probably influenced my career more than anything else. It's just so magical. That. I mean, it's not like we can have lickable wallpaper anytime soon with COVID, but
everything is edible. I mean, how about Elon Musk? He decided now he's going to sell all material possessions.
And he's Gene Wilder's house.
So the one stipulation he has with Gene Wilder's house is that whoever buys it from him must maintain its character. He said there's doors that open up to nothing. There's cabinets that are all misshaped and they're not perfect squares, and he just wants that to be maintained.
I love it. If only I could buy it from him.
Hey, maybe one day.
Maybe one day. Yeah, so definitely like that. I mean, David Bowie has been a huge influence like on me. Just, I think the more like artistic, imaginative side, and then a career like design and architecture wise, like S. Devlin is somebody I think of as a role model. Like she's been able to really create her own niche of expertise that crosses a lot of different areas, whether she's like designing concerts or, sculpture pieces or spaces or art. David Byrne, I think he's like really transitioned his Talking Heads fame into like all kinds of art, and somebody who's like, sees the world really differently and is able to bring all his interests together into one area.
It is very cool how you're able to bring those together and find the intersection of your greatest passion and your greatest competency, which I believe is what your purpose is. And I was reading this article, I think it was by the World Economic Forum, about the top reasons that cities become so popular as a tourist destination. One was food and the other was architecture. Those are like the top 2 reasons. So it makes sense. I mean, when you think about Paris, you think about the Eiffel Tower, for example, and that becomes a tourist destination simply because of an architectural design. It's amazing that you can create a landmark that ultimately turns into business and economic value.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you can create the thing, and if you don't have the atmosphere, I mean, that's what I'm really interested in is like, what are the intangibles? Because you've seen, I'm sure there's like a Paris of China where they just like rebuilt the Eiffel Tower and all these things. And it's very eerie. And there's something like I was thinking the other day when I was walking through the park, how do you know what country you're in when you're walking through a park? They could be the same in every country. And it's like those subtle things, the sounds, the scents, like, the trees, the little things about the architecture that really tip you off. Like, hey, I'm in Berlin, I'm in New York. And I think that's the stuff I'm really interested in figuring out, like how to imbue that in space. Because you can build something, but if it doesn't have any like feeling to it,
so
nobody's going to want to go there.
If you have to create that, like I know Walt Disney did this, he covered up the region, the swampland in Orlando with a tarp so people flying over couldn't see what he was doing because he knew they would hate on it. So I know he has some crazy rules like underground tunnels, so the employees are never seen by the customers, and they pick up gum from the sidewalks every single night, so there's never any gum on the sidewalks. Are there other ways that you can create these intangibles that give you this vibe? Like Walt Disney has this prestigious or pristine environment that always looks perfect and clean.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much to learn from theme parks. I spent way too many hours playing Roller Coaster Tycoon as a kid, and that computer game is great. But yeah, I mean, Disney's been a big inspiration too. I think that the theater of space is not something you really talk a lot about in architecture school, and it's definitely, I mean, there's this middle ground between interior design and architecture, and I think that's sort of where I am. But the theory around it, everybody has a really different perspective. I just read this great book called The Eyes of the Skin, and it's basically about how spaces can make you feel something like in your body, like tactile things, without even touching it. And it's things like the material of the walls. Like there are some really, like whether it's stone or concrete or clay, there's some real things that really make you feel something. That's so different from if you have like a slick, screens everywhere. And there's a time and place for screens everywhere too. But I think there are a lot of like little details that have to do with, whether it's the door handle you're touching or maybe not touching after this. But all of those tiny things build up to a big picture. And I think it's not something that everybody notices, every little detail, but you can feel it if it feels flat. Like if you go to like one of these museum of Instagram things, like, that there's just not much else going on besides what you see. And I think it takes a lot of detailed work to be able to create things that maybe most people won't notice, but it'll make all the difference.
That's a great point. And it sounds like with the pop-up experiences, you get to test out different micro experiences and experiments on a larger scale with many different companies. I know pop-up are becoming hugely popular. One of my clients at MIT actually does this for a living. So they worked with a skincare company and created this environment where customers could come in and get their skincare tested and then find the right product. And they made it really cool and fun and exciting. So what's your ideal client? Like who is it? Pop-up experiences? Is it real estate development firms? Who's your ideal client? Like who hires you?
Yeah. Definitely brands, like you're talking about, like brands that have sensory products. There's something I love. Like I love when you can dig into the product itself and then build a space that embodies that. So whether it's like a mattress or a razor brand or like soap or perfumes, like being able to dig into the product science or like the touch and feel of the actual thing and then express that in space. That's something I don't think a lot of other people are doing right now. And it's a lot of pop-ups tend to follow a formulaic model of, we're going to create this Instagrammable experience, but then you forget what product you were there to see. And my theory is to really go ground up and start with the product. I also love anybody who is fun, whimsical, like wants to take risks, definitely trying to build like playgrounds for adults. So any brands that have that sort of sense of humor is a really good match.
That sounds awesome. Like sparking that childlike curiosity again in us. That's one of the things I love about your messaging on your website is how you want to bring back that play-like child in us. And we sometimes lose that. It's like George Bernard Shaw's quote about how we don't grow old or we don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing.
Definitely. Definitely. And there's a big mindfulness part of it too. I think it integrates with the science. Like a lot of people are doing meditation, right? But meditation works for some people. For others, it's really grounding your body and where you are. And when you engage in these kinds of play and you have these sensory experiences, you're in the present. And a lot of our experiences today are built around like photographing yourself. And that's such an abstraction, and it takes you away from where you are, and you don't even form a memory of the thing. You just have the photo. You can't even remember the day. So I'm trying to reverse that.
Yeah, and it's like what you talked about. You can create this Instagrammable experience, which is great and does well for the bottom line. But what about the people that are there enjoying the environment firsthand? They're going to be sharing this story or experience with 10 other friends possibly, and you want them to have the best experience. So I love that you're kind of including all the intangibles and tangibles at once, and it's beautiful. And I saw the pictures on your website. It looks absolutely incredible. And the fact that you get the financial side of things too from your background, you're able to think about how can this generate more sales, for example, in the company.
Yeah, I mean, definitely budget conscious designer for sure. I'm not like proposing marble countertops in every pop-up. I get how to do a lot with a little. I mean, even like the Tupperware pop-up or any of these have been on a really small, like a lean budget, working a lot with color and texture. But yeah, so it definitely helps to have a client services background to be able to be like, look, I get where you're coming from and what your concerns are and what your CEO and CFO are telling you about what this needs to be like. So then being able to like jump right into design from there is great.
It's like the 80-20 rule. What's the 20% of changes you can make that generate 80% of the impact for the company? And that's awesome. And so when you're trying to be budget conscious, but also create an amazing imagination of a design, you have to be scrappy. You have to hustle. So what's something scrappy you did to hustle that maybe you couldn't have revealed in the very beginning of being a startup or a founder, but you can reveal now?
Yeah, I mean, there's one like that I don't know if I should admit. No, I can. My first store design project, I was hired as like the architectural designer, 3D modeler, etc. I actually didn't know how to use a 3D modeling program. I mean, I had dabbled. I had done like a course where I learned about it, and then I did like one really fun little project for myself, but I really didn't know much more than the basics. And luckily I was working with a friend of a friend, and they sort of gave me a 2-week trial period. It was my first project. They were like, in 2 weeks, if you really can't do this, we're going to move on. And I just taught myself and figured things out. Luckily, my boyfriend also went to architecture school, so he helped me just get the basics and pass the test for week 2, and then kept going from there. I mean, looking back, it's actually pretty good. Even though I didn't really know what I was doing, I didn't let that limit me in terms of the design. The model is like a little messy, but it looks great. So
hey, teamwork to make the dream
work. You get the
work.
idea out there. That's what matters.
You got to fake it till you make it sometimes. And that leads to real tangible results. And so you did it. So congratulations.
Yeah. And now I know how to use 3D. I know how to use many different ones.
Now it's legitimate.
Yeah.
So we're going to transition now into something I like to call, Kate, the under 30 seconds round. I'm going to fire off a few questions and answer them as fast as you can with the first thing that comes to mind. Okay. Are you ready?
Ready.
What is the book you've gifted more often than any other book, and why?
I love one of my favorite books ever is called Einstein's Dreams. It's by Alan Lightman. It's basically like all the crazy physics of Einstein and, all those theoretical concepts condensed into these cute stories about these little villages in the mountains. And it's really accessible, but it will really blow your mind. And space-time, you'll have no idea what you believe anymore.
I know you listening are going to want to pick that one up. It's awesome. Number 2, what's one of the best and one of the worst investments you've ever made, and why?
So my best one, and this has been recent, has been a weighted blanket. Highly recommend.
I've been hearing
Best
about
sleep
these.
of my life.
The gravity
Yeah.
blankets, right?
Yeah, I don't have the gravity one. The gravity, they like came a little later to the game, and it's super expensive. There are a lot of other companies out there that do a good job too. Magic weighted blankets is a good one. That came like directly from, it was invented for like the neurodiverse community, and they come from that angle. So yeah, I mean, if you have like anxiety or you're just a light sleeper, it's a game changer.
And one of the worst investments you've ever made.
Worst investment, yeah. I would say a Hampton share house. Way overhyped.
Touche.
It's a
Sorry,
lot
all you
of
Hampton
money.
lovers.
I mean, I grew up going out there a bit, and yeah, I've moved on.
Good for you. What's one of your guilty pleasures or favorite cheat meals?
Yeah, so I don't really believe in either of these concepts. I mean, the quick version is just like, I think you should just enjoy what you enjoy and don't be embarrassed about it. Own it. It's your thing.
Good
and
answer.
then with food too, it's like, we have so many rules. Diet culture is just crazy, and I'm just, like, do whatever feels good for you, and trust your body, and it's much smarter than we all are. So
Good answer.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite meal at least, or a favorite food?
Yeah, favorite food. I mean, a classic New Yorker, pizza, bagel.
Oh, this is a controversial topic, Kate. You're not going to get out of this one without mentioning what's the number one pizza to get in New York and the number one bagel place.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So nobody believes me when I say this. My hometown has what I consider to be best of both, but I'll skip those because they're outside of the city. But pizza, I don't know. It's so hard. I really like Polly G's, actually. Their new slice place in Greenpoint. It's really good because I'm always torn between Joe's and DeFara, and it's sort of like a middle ground. And they also have like other innovative flavors and stuff. So
and what about bagels?
So my favorite ever is on 28th Street between Park and Lex. It's called Bagel and Schmear, I think. It has just one of those super generic names.
There you go, New Yorkers. You know where to get your pizza and bagels. Awesome. And number 4, pretend you won the Peter Thiel Fellowship and you were going to get money to start a business rather than go to college. What's the very first thing you would do to start your business?
So besides the chocolate factory, I definitely want to build or / theme park, which would be great. I mean, I think there are so many startups out there that are just like solution focused, and I wouldn't do, my professors at Oxford or my Luminary Labs team proud if I didn't like start with the problem. So you have to find a problem. And so I would go looking for problems. I think there aren't a lot of startups like focused on, I mean, there are increasingly more, but focused on women and women's problems and issues. Also like the elderly, I think the aging population is going to have a big impact on the disabled. I just think there aren't enough startups focused on that. And if you actually design for special populations, a lot of times you can come up with something that's going to be good for everybody. When you think of like OXO tools, those were designed for people with arthritis. They're great. Everybody likes them. So
there you go.
That would be my approach.
Last question. What's something you never knew you needed?
This has been a game changer. The Margaritaville frozen concoction maker.
So it's an actual, like, what, you just pour in the ingredients and it just churns out a frozen margarita? It's
like halfway between the like restaurant professional version and like a blender. If you have a blender, this is like a huge step up. Got like recipes, you put the ice in, it's like an 8-part little machine. It's great.
That's amazing.
You can get it on Amazon. It will improve your quarantine experience.
That's great. Well, Kate, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Before you go, what's the next big goal, milestone, or bucket list item that you want to achieve?
I'm really excited about doing a project after COVID, after all this. I really want to be involved in like what the future looks like. I'm working on some thought leadership around that and working with some old clients, starting to think about that, and excited to start building again.
I know you wanted to share a thought leadership piece that you recently worked on. Where can listeners go to find that?
Yeah, well, it's in the process of being published, so it will be on the Extra Terrestrial Studio website in the near future by the time this is up. So,
can you share the URL, and then where
Yeah.
do listeners go to connect with you directly?
Yeah, it's extraterrestrialstudio.co is the URL, and they can contact me through that or on LinkedIn or Instagram. I'm Kate T. Gray. It's my handle everywhere.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today. We learned so much how to fashion up or design level up your home office. We learned about how to make the best margarita, the best pizza and bagel shops in New York City, and some books to read if you're into design or just want to change the way you think about the world. I hope this episode helped you as much as it helped me. Have an amazing day, and thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope this episode helped you as much as it helped me. Who do you think would benefit from hearing it? You can make an impact on their life by sharing it now. Before you go, I encourage you to tell us your favorite part of the episode in the review section. Now it's time to level up. Level up.